In this video, we're going to talk about crown Samducksa buttons. We're going to open up these buttons. I'm going to show you guys what tools you guys need, do a couple sound tests. We're even going to create our own switch.
Super safe eating.
Let's talk about the Sanwa buttons. This was my daily driving button. It's what I knew, it's what I grew up with. It's representative of the times. But by that I also mean it's kind of dated. The technology in these buttons haven't really progressed with the times. The snap-in has a tendency to break. That's one of the major cons that I don't like. It's just maybe it's just the way the plastic is or the way it ages, just like any plastic or any type of material. But these have a tendency to snap. And it sucks because it'll make your buttons pretty loose. Like one of mine is pretty loose. So I decided to explore crown Samducksa buttons. These buttons, and this is not a paid advertisement because I purchased with my own money, but there's a micro switch capability, and for me that was a huge selling point. Screw-in. Now that I've actually experienced a screw-in button, I like these a lot. The only drawback is you do need room, plenty of room to get this through. Luckily for me, my hitbox, my leverless, there's a lot of space. These are 30mm buttons, so there's a lot of space to screw these in. So to me it works. Maybe on a smaller hitbox with 24mm, I'm not too sure how that would be because it's a pretty compact layout, which is not my preference anyways, just because ease of going in and doing what you want with the art and modding your arcade stick. But these buttons themselves, having the capability of the micro switch, as I mentioned, being full, clear, and translucent with the screw-in, and having the ability to put in art. I think this is the only commercially available button. Someone let me know if there's other ones that are out there. The ones that I see are like 3D printed buttons where they just have a button top that kind of fits on the stem of a micro switch, but that's it. You can't really insert art. So that was the huge selling point for me because that's what I was looking for. So I want to segue into some sound tests, and then I'll talk about the overall feel of the button when comparing the Sanwas to the crown Samducksas. So the Sanwa buttons versus the crown in terms of feel. Sanwa, they're very clacky. You could kind of hear that more from the sound test, but it's the way that it like bottoms out or the way that the plastic hits the plastic. Like it's scratchy, clacky. It doesn't feel refined, even from the plastic itself. It's a little bit lighter plastic in comparison to the crown. So the crowns have, maybe they're the same material. It feels like a Sanwa button, but a more elevated one. Like the plastic seems to be a little bit more denser, if that makes any sense. The way that the finish is on the button, even though it possibly is the same material, there's a nice finish to it. And the ability to just change those micro switches is where the player experience is really going to be different. We're going to be moving on to the modding section of the video. I'm going to be talking about the buttons, opening these up, showing you guys how to do it, tools, some tips. I'm also going to be exploring some micro switches and playing around with them, maybe even creating our own little Frankenswitch. Just a friendly tip when modding your stick, be sure not to put too much force on some of these things. That's why the right tools with the right amount of pressure, you don't want to break anything. Let's talk a little bit about the tools that I'm using for the job. First, you'll need a screwdriver, flathead preferably. I have a micro switch puller. This is pretty much used for keyboards and I have needle nose pliers. So you'll need the screwdriver pretty much to pop off these tops. There's a little plastic clip that allows this button from flying off. Once you open up the housing, should look like roughly like this, but with a micro switch in it. In order to pull the micro switch out, I recommend using this tool, which is a micro switch puller. There's two little prongs here that pretty much just it kind of slips right under the micro switch. There we go. So here's the micro switch, and the micro switch puller, there's like little lips. You won't be able to see it because the camera cannot focus that this can grab onto. So this is a nifty little tool to making this job a little easier. And then lastly, you will need some needle nose pliers, primarily to remove, there's a housing in the back of this little button here. Here it is. This is where you can place the art. And this is actually, I'm trying to keep this as clean as possible. This is where everything is going to be sitting on top. So what I use is very easy to pull out. I use the needle nose pliers here. Found a location that's nice and stable, not crimping anything, and you just yank it out. I did want to talk about this a little briefly. Micro switches with these legs here in kind of the teal translucent housing, there are legs. Those just need to be clipped off if you're trying to put them into the Crown Samducksa button housings. See that plate there? There's room for the two pins, however, not those plastic legs. So all you got to do is take a couple nail cutters, just clip them like so. You just got to make it as flush as possible. And boom, that flew somewhere. So I got to go look for those. These are a lot poppier than the other one. It's something I'm noticing. An unfortunate problem regarding the Zeal Aquasilent micro switch being in the Crown Samducksa arcade button. The problem is it gets stuck pretty frequently, which is not good. As you can see, it can be replicated by multiple presses. It takes a while to get it replicated. Oh, there we go. I just replicated it. So imagine that happens in a game. That is gonna suck. I'm going to introduce a new tool since I have to experiment with the micro switches. This is actually a micro switch opener. They have different configurations for the micro switch opener, and that's primarily due to the type of housing the micro switch has. So you may not be able to see it, but there's two tabs on the left and the right, which would line up in theory with this. So you'd line it up, and that's what causes that to open. And then for these Kailhs linears, there's the tab. So this micro switch opener would be used for that type. I've got the two micro switches open. The one on the left is the Deep Sea Linears by Kailhs, and then I have the Aquasilents on the right side. The Aquasilents have a 62 gram force spring in it because there's a poppiness that I like from the button itself. Like the micro switch is giving a nice poppiness to it, like it retracts up, but the tactility in the stem is causing it to get stuck. If I switch out the springs from the 62 gram force and put it into the Kailhs box switch, it might work out. I want to briefly talk about the buttons and my overall impressions of them. We'll start with the first button that I tested, which was a Zeal Aquasilent button. This is the one where I removed the spring and swapped it out with the Kailhs Silent Whale springs. So now the spring is 45 gram force, but the way that the spring was like kind of wounded up, there's different ways that you could kind of wind up the spring, and it has different compression properties. In any case, without going further into it, that spring actually works really well on this button. It actually prevents it. It still gives me that springy, poppy feel that I want, at least for my directionals. And yeah, just overall, I'm impressed with it because this is probably what I'm going to be rocking with. It has the feel that I prefer. Nice little pop to it. It is going to make a little bit more noise. However, I think the way that like it's got a good it retracts up really well. It's a good feeling button. Next, I have the second button, which is the Kailhs switches with the Zeal the Zeal spring in it, which is a 62 gram force spring. This was just a little too heavy. I didn't like the feel. It's like now I'm fighting to push this button. Good, you know, it's good because it retracts up really well. But again, it's the retracting down. The way that spring is doesn't really suit this micro switch very well. So this was my least favorite. Next was just the regular deep sea silent linear switches by Kailhs. This is probably what I'm going to be using for my my like all punches and all my kicks, all my attack buttons. The reason why it's, I don't know, this is good enough. Like I feel like I could double tap really well. I don't need tactility at all. Not on attack buttons. I prefer tactility on my directionals though. Something about having that unconscious feedback when you push the button. To me, it's more suited for directional inputs. Just my opinion. And this is the Zeal. So this Zeal button, I like the feel of it. It is a little bit loud, but for some reason with the stock spring, it gets stuck. And that's what drove me to making this little Frankenswitch. We just discovered another problem. Unfortunately, just the Zeal switches, the Aquasilents, they do not work in the crown Samducksa housing. The reason why is right before I put in the button top, I clicked the switch inside the housing and I test it out to see that everything is actuating on the controller configuration, whatever firmware you're using. It works when I click it, but as soon as I add the button top on top of it, it doesn't actuate it. It's not creating a closed loop. And what I did notice after lots of testing, it's due to the stem height. So I have two different stems here. The Kailhs box switches, this is the tactile whale. Notice when I put it all the way down, there is still some stem that is protruding out. The Zeal actually goes much lower. That's why it's not actuating properly with the crown Samducksa button top. So pay attention to the height of the stems. It looks like you need something where the stem protrudes slightly above the actual micro switch housing. So here's the final product. I ended up going with the switches that actually worked in the directionals, which are the tactiles. Other than that, we're going to boot up Street Fighter 6, test this entire thing out. Future video, I plan on adding LEDs to this. So other than that, thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you learned something, because I did. If you guys want to run some sets with my community or myself, be sure to hit up the Discord. And if you got any questions, I got social media, so hit me up there. Other than that, I'll see you guys in the hub.